Abandoned prisons aren't all that uncommon for most of us. What if your apartment was once part of a place of punishment, or even the college or university you chose? Both are the case in this story. Grab a snack and take a listen to what Olympia and Cicero are dealing with this time. It wasn't at all surprising to Olympia and Cicero when they found themselves sitting at one of the picnic tables outside the dorms of the local university. The land itself had a dark history, beginning with its first use as an execution yard. The oldest journal entry Olympia had uncovered to date was about one individual who didn't respond well to the conflict resolution practices Ethereal Springs utilized at the time, becoming one of the first known cases of banishment from the town. Unfortunately, banishment hadn't worked either. According to the journal, there was once a young woman who earned a mix of opinions about herself. Some said she was possessed by evil spirits, others said she was just plain insane. No amount of talking, reasoning, nor even threats would do anything to make a positive change in her behavior. These solutions only escalated the issue, and as time passed, animals would be found severely maimed or even dead, among other things. Eventually, she was banished from Ethereal Springs, as the town council was adamantly against building an asylum to house ill souls like her. This tactic didn't work for long, as she returned multiple times. Residents suffered her wrath in various ways for months until she was finally caught. The townspeople chained her to a tree until they could figure out a way to deal with her, as she was far too dangerous to be around other people, including around-the-clock guards. Before a decision could be made, on the second day she was bound to the tree, a bad storm hit the area. The tree was struck by lightning. The combination of rain and the metal surrounding her body caused her to be electrocuted before the flames engulfing the tree feasted upon her flesh and bones alike. Popular consensus of the time being to keep the graves of the harmful separate from the rest of the townspeople. That was the first of what would become many unmarked graves on that specific plot of land. So, you think this entry is about the red-eyed lady? Cicero asked. It makes sense, as she is the one most commonly reported from the first years the old prison was in use, Olympia explained. The red-eyed lady was infamous for attacking prisoners and guards alike during the prison's prime. Construction workers even claimed strange things happened to them while working on the building. Mysterious deaths and severe accidents had also been accredited to this malicious entity over the centuries since her death on the property. She was considered the absolute worst entity to still haunt the grounds, despite all attempts to cleanse the land and the entire structure in preparation for the university to take over the place. It went without saying Cicero and Olympia had never witnessed the ghost personally when they were students themselves, but they were both aware of rumors and other people's personal accounts. In Ethereal Springs, people were more prone to share what they experienced rather than shun it and keep it secret. It was just normal everyday life in this town. They actually built on the original execution grounds, Cicero muttered, shaking his head. That definitely explains a lot. How can you be so sure this is about the red-eyed lady? Evidence is suggesting the red-eyed lady was the first ever execution in Ethereal Springs history, although completely by accident. The prison went up in this spot because they felt being haunted was a better punishment than any method of torture the guards could ever come up with. That was before the bleeding hearts began to feel pity for serial rapists and murderers, she added, rolling her eyes. I think I'd prefer they kept this place a prison and built the university on an untainted plot, Cicero grumbled. With all the mysterious deaths and unexplained accidents, they had no choice in closing the prison down, although they did cleanse every square inch of the land with every ritual in every book that has ever existed, Olympia said. Lot of good old doing all that did, Cicero scoffed, shaking his head. These days, a simple hint of ditching people at the edge of oblivion works a lot better than any threat of a few years in a haunted prison, Olympia smiled, having used said hints on more than a few creeps in town. The red-eyed lady was nothing to joke about, nor was she one to let anyone believe she was pure myth, having several accidents and injuries under her belt since the university first began renovations of the old prison. She was far from the only entity haunting the university, but she was definitely the most malicious. Like a cat in a mouse hole, she preferred toying with people more than anything else, although she did end up getting someone killed from time to time. This entity didn't start with violent antics. Most claimed they saw a pair of red eyes and reflective surfaces in dark corners in their peripherals several times. Not all of these experiences escalated, as the red-eyed lady was picky about whom she toyed with. There had been numerous reports from both students and former inmates of the prison about sightings of what was likely the red-eyed lady on stormy nights. Olympia felt this was rather cliché, but the reports were all the same. A woman sitting on the ground, chained to a tree, as she writhed and fought against her restraints, would appear only in a lightning flash. As there were no actual records of anything in Ethereal Springs before the old records building had burned down roughly 300 years ago, Olympia bit her lip as she thought of her options for getting anything remotely searchable about this particular entity. Using tools many utilized in paranormal investigation was as commonplace in Ethereal Springs as brushing one's teeth, but the results weren't considered reliable without concrete proof, such as legal documents that led to a certain amount of correlating information. Because weeks of searching had only turned up the information of the town records building's destruction that took an estimated centuries worth of documents with it, Olympia had gotten an idea from Chris. In her bag, Olympia had a pair of crystals and stands, a method Chris swore by, as she often used it to communicate with a spirit in her own home. A digital recorder and her camera were also tucked away to document whatever answers were provided. Cicero and Olympia started writing down what questions they wanted to ask. They didn't want this to get off topic, nor did they want to be there too long. The questions were simple and to the point. Most of them would only require a yes or no answer. The digital recorder was just backup for anything extra that could come through that had any chance of helping Olympia with the fact-checking later. So far, the facts were hard to get a firm grip on, and Olympia was steadily becoming irritated by that, especially since she had grown up believing Ethereal Springs wasn't a community prone to keeping secrets. The opposite was steadily becoming more likely, in spite of several city laws suggesting the contrary. But Olympia shoved that mental debate out of her mind as best she could and started. Being out in the middle of the night did nothing good for their nervousness, but they didn't want anyone poking their noses into this and adding to the already overflowing rumor mill. On top of that, both felt more than a little silly using all the items they brought, hoping to get anything useful out of an entity with a history of thinking shoving a person through a glass door as common courtesy rather than opening the door like a normal person. Growing up in a town with as many reported hauntings as Ethereal Springs didn't necessarily mean that every native resident was born with the ghost hunting bug included. After being caught at work looking at the footage from Trapper's Lake during her lunch hour, Olympia had been ordered by her superiors to get full documentation of everything directly related to the journals. Olympia turned on the digital recorder while Cicero manned the camera. The black obsidian crystal swung when she requested the entities to choose which crystal they would use as their yes answer. Olympia didn't bother beating around the bush with bullshit questions typical of a lot of ghost hunting videos on the internet. Yes, the entity they were talking to had in fact died on the land the university sat on. No, they were never an inmate at the prison. No, they were never a student of the university. No, they weren't even one of the few guards who had died at the prison. No, they weren't a construction worker who had died on the job either. Yes, they died before the prison was even built. Olympia was getting chills running laps along her spine at this point. One look at Cicero told her he was feeling just as uneasy. So far, the answers were solidifying her original gut feeling that the red-eyed lady was, in fact, the one written about in the diary. Neither of them was sure if they should just finish with their list of questions or just leave, but nothing they had thus far was really anything that was searchable. After a few moments of giving herself a mental pep talk, Olympia forced herself to finish asking the questions on her list. Did you die before the old records building burned down? The black obsidian moved more violently than it had been at this point. Are you the entity known as the Red-Eyed Lady? This time, the answer was a single flash, as if a sudden storm was right on top of them. A figure chained to a tree in clothing so old, Olympia could only assume it was from before the 18th century, was pointing in the general direction that filled both Cicero and Olympia with absolute dread, appeared at the center of it. The woman was staring at them with glowing red eyes, her mouth seemingly stuck in a permanent scream of agony at its peak. She was only there for a fraction of a moment, but she had just one thing to say. Those ghosties, I swear. They're always trying to give away spoilers. Oh well, I have no control over them. They do as they please. Especially that red-eyed lady, the cause of Unsound Foundations. Still, her mentioning oblivion is not a good sign at all.
Slap that subscribe button and hook that rope to the bell so you'll be notified when there is a new piece to the puzzle hidden within the series. If you liked the story, hit those like and share buttons so others can enjoy the mystery as it unfolds. Leave a comment if you wish. I'm always looking for ways to improve the quality of my writing. The link to merch is right down below in the description and on my channel's banner links. Remember, life would be boring without a few scares.